So today we are going to talk about the Neutrality Acts of the 1930s, and basically these acts are going to give us insight into how the U.S. responded to the actions of Hitler and Mussolini during the 1930s. Now, before we jump into what the acts are all about, we have to tackle what neutrality means. In essence, what it means to be neutral is that you do not support either sides in a conflict. So, as an example, imagine that you have two friends. One is named Jack, the other is named John, and they are having an argument as to who is the better basketball player. Now, in this instance, if you want to stay neutral in this conflict, in this argument that Jack and John are having, you would not say that, yes, Jack, you are the better basketball player, because then you are supporting a side. You are taking sides in the conflict, and you are no longer just listening to the argument that the two are having. In regards to relations with other countries, a lot of Americans actually favored neutrality. They became known as isolationists, and what these isolationists wanted is basically for the U.S. to take care of themselves first and worry about the problems within U.S. society, rather than becoming involved in somebody else's war or somebody else's conflict. And really, the U.S. shouldn't be involved in somebody else's war or conflict, because that just causes more heartache for the American citizen, in the view of the isolationist. So they wanted the U.S. to take care of themselves and stay out of conflicts throughout the world. The government responded to this feeling among many American citizens by passing the 1935 Neutrality Act, which banned the U.S. from selling weapons and ammo to countries who were at war. So it didn't matter if the U.S. maybe had an ally. This act prevented the U.S. altogether from selling weapons and ammunition, regardless of whether they were an ally of the U.S., as long as they were at war. In 1936, Congress renewed the act, meaning they allowed it to continue for another year. And they also added something onto the act. In 1936, they added that American banks were prevented from giving money or loans to countries who were at war. One thing that the 1937 Act did include was the cash and carry. So what the cash and carry provision allowed was that these countries who were at war, which we refer to as belligerent nations, could buy U.S. products, except weapons, of course, with cash. Then these countries, after buying these products, would have to bring their ships over to the U.S. mainland and transport the products that they bought back to their home country. Now, FDR kind of could choose which countries were allowed to do this, which, as we will see, it favored Great Britain and France, who were in opposition to Hitler and Mussolini. So, for instance, under this cash and carry part of the 1937 Neutrality Act, Great Britain could come over to the U.S., buy a bunch of oil, and then on their British ships take it back to take it back to their country. The last Neutrality Act that was passed that we will cover is the 1939 Neutrality Act. So this is right after Hitler invades into Czechoslovakia the year before in 1938. He added Austria to his empire. And what this act did, it lifted the ban on weapons sales that was originally implemented in 1935. So everything, including weapons, was put under cash and carry. So again, if we use our example, the British could come over to the United States and now under the 1939 Neutrality Act could buy weapons and anything else that may fuel their war effort against Hitler and Mussolini. Now, it did keep the ban on loans, so American banks, they weren't allowed to give money to countries at war, and also the U.S. could not physically take these goods over to the countries whom were buying it. Really what the cash and carry provision did, it was really advocated for on the part of FDR, and he sought this as a kind of sneaky way to aid Great Britain and France, because at this time both countries really were the only ones who had hard currency, meaning cash, and had a lot of cash, and also the resources, the ships to not only go over there and buy the products, but then bring the products back to their mainland. So this was really a deliberate act by FDR, again in a very sneaky way, to aid the Brits and the French in their fight against Hitler